The balancing of these factors signifies the evolution of a general standard of money prices, which is certainly the final result of many subjective and fortuitous deviations from what we know. For instance, of the economic circumstances of the Palestinian Jews in an earlier period, it seems that they were struck by the extraordinary cheapness of certain articles and enormous prices of others. Since the relationship to present prices is so varied that it defies rational analysis, one cannot say, and this is perhaps true of any period of antiquity, that the general money value at that time differs by such and such an amount from the present. Actually, a general money value did not formerly exist at all. This phenomenon has been tentatively explained by the economic gulf between rich and poor, which was not reduced by any ambitions on the part of the poor with regard to their standard of living. This was due to the lower strata's great and stable contentedness, with the result that they generally did not have any desire for certain goods. Therefore, two totally different standards of money prices evolved, one for what the poor were able to pay and one for the domain of the rich to whom money did not matter. This might have been the case among all ancient peoples. In this connection, it must be emphasized that, according to recent social views, the middle classes wished to be equal to the upper classes, and the lower classes to be equal to the middle classes with regard to clothing, food, comfort and entertainment. For the first time, this has opened up the possibility of a uniform and general money value. General economic culture, in view of this development, may be said to tend towards making what were originally cheap objects more expensive and vice versa. This leveling process is first displayed in an objective manner, and finds its truly astounding manifestation in the average rate of profit. Through an almost unbelievable and unconscious process of mutual adjustment of all the economic factors concerned, industrial enterprises which in a developed economy are independent of each other and quite different as to materials, labor conditions and rates of return, nevertheless yield, ceteris paribus, the same rate of interest in relation to the capital invested in them. Any similar adjustment of the subjective eudaimonistic results of money values is obviously out of the question in view of the individual differentiation of human beings. However, a somewhat similar adjustment might be reached in the cultural process because all objects will gradually become expressible in money terms, and a general standard of money prices, that is the uniform importance of money for all commodities, will gradually be established. On the scale of the quantity of money, certain points might possibly emerge as the equivalents of those objects that mark the economic enjoyment or blasé threshold for a specific individual or type. In the sphere of threshold phenomena, a sphere that is the most difficult to examine in view of its complications and individualizations, money remains the only object which, through its purely quantitative character and its uniform response to all differences between things, provides the possibility of arranging the manifold sensitivities in one uniform series. In addition, however, certain occurrences indicate the very direct importance that money has for the threshold of economic awareness, in the sense that our consciousness responds as specific economic awareness only to a pecuniary stimulus. Bourgeois narrow-mindedness often refuses to give an object away for altruistic reasons on the grounds that it has cost money, and this is perceived as the justification for proceeding according to the rigid, egoistical principle of sheer economy. In the same way, foolish parents attempt to hold their children back from willful destruction by asserting that the things they wish to destroy cost money. Instead of explaining to their children the value of the object itself, they immediately react economically only to the idea of money spent. Two totally different phenomena illustrate this in a very characteristic way. Presents are often valued only if the giver has spent money on them. To make a present out of one's own possessions seems to be shabby, illegitimate and inadequate. Only very refined and superior people will appreciate a present most if the giver has owned it. In the former case, the awareness of a sacrifice on the part of the giver develops in the receiver only if the sacrifice is made in terms of money. On the other hand, a money present seems to be incompatible with the standards of the upper circles of society, and even servants, coachmen or messengers often appreciate a cigar more than a tip of perhaps 3 times its value. The decisive fact here is that the gift should not appear as economically significant, or at least that, allowing its economic nature to recede into the background, it should bring about considerable cordiality. In all these cases, only the money form of value stimulates economic awareness, and the same procedure will be desired or rejected depending on the sentiments evoked. Even though the fully developed money economy arranges economic objects in a continuous series, there remains such a general difference between these objects and money, a fact that is less true for barter economies, that the emergence of a threshold of awareness that reacts only to the money value becomes quite understandable. Relations between external stimuli and emotional responses in the field of money. There is another reason that specifically relates the phenomena of the threshold of awareness to money. The existence and accumulation of causes whose real proportional effect is excluded are more likely to prevail above a certain limit, and, to push the limits of these effects still higher, the more stable and motionless is the whole system that surrounds the occurrence. As is well known, water can be cooled considerably below 0 point without freezing it if it is protected from any motion, whereas the slightest vibration immediately causes it to ice up. Similarly, it is possible to keep one's hand in gradually heated water much longer than it would otherwise be bearable if one avoids any motion. Thus, in higher and more complicated areas, numerous influences and circumstances evoke corresponding sensory reactions only when our whole being is aroused, perhaps from a totally different angle. In the same way, the possession of values as well as the privation of values or the unworthiness of certain situations can exist for a long time and even gradually grow before we become aware of their importance. There must first be an impulse that causes the internal elements to dash into one another in order for us to become aware of their real strength through their newly discovered relations or through the difference of relations to all other elements. Indeed, emotions like love and hate may live inside us for a long time, and accumulate below the surface, exercising certain disguised effects, until some occurrence, most often the interruption of the formal regularity of a relationship, causes the emotions to explode into our consciousness and thus first provides the unfolding and the profusion of their consequences. Social developments take a similar course. Senselessness and abuses not only creep into once consolidated states of affairs but also accumulate and increase below the threshold of social awareness, often to the extent that their endurance is no longer conceivable from that moment when the general process of putting things in order, which often has its origins in totally different impulses, brings about an awareness of these disturbances. As is well known, the convulsions of a country experiencing a foreign war first openly reveal the contradictions and the total defects of a state. This explains, for instance, our earlier observation that very crass social differences and the insurmountable distance between classes usually go hand in hand with social harmony. The call for egalitarian reforms or for revolutions is usually raised only after the rigidity of class barriers has been alleviated and a livelier movement within society has brought about certain intermediate transitional phenomena and a degree of contact between the social orders which allows mutual comparison.